Welcome, everyone, to Integrated Wellbeing YouTube channel and podcast for people in grief and the professionals who serve them. I'm Georgena Grace, and I want you to know that at the Welbeing Institute, we provide education, inspiration, and practical tools by interviewing those bereaved by loss, mental health professionals, and grief specialists. Integrated Wellbeing Institute seeks to awaken the griever to their inner peace through the guidance of their body. And today I am absolutely delighted to introduce to you Michelle Ann Collins, an author, as well as a suicide survivor. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, Georgena. Thanks so much for having me.
You are so welcome. It's wonderful to see you today because Michelle and I met when I was working at a yoga studio. I had an office there for my practice, and Michelle was teaching yoga, and she's experienced a death by suicide of her husband. And so she came in to see me. And the first thing I said to her today is, "Oh, Michelle, it's so wonderful to see you in your body." So Michelle, please introduce yourself. Give our audience just 2 or 3 sentences about your background because you've studied extensively.
I have, thank you. It's so hard to know where to start, but starting with when I met you is perfect. I had just completed my yoga therapy training. So I'm a yoga therapist, and my husband, Glenn, died by suicide in 2016 as I was working through my practicum for my yoga therapy certification. I am now a grief coach after 7 years of study. Well, first a couple years of recovery, where I really was non-functional, and then finding my way to being able to teach and write and speak about grief and work with clients through study, grief education. I also did an Ayurvedic certification through the Chopra Center, which was fabulous, and a wellness coaching. I have a lot of tools under my belt to help myself and my clients and audiences.
Thank you so much. Well, it was wonderful to read your book. And you are the first author to be interviewed here on Integrated Wellbeing who has written and released 2 books simultaneously. What prompted you to undertake this Herculean task, Michelle?
Thank you for that. It was a Herculean task. And I remember telling my publisher on the day, she called them my twins, on the day my twins were born, and telling all my author friends, we had a launch party that day. And I said, just don't do 2 at a time. My biggest recommendation to you. But to be honest, to write the first book, I was really called and by a higher power. It was a year after Glenn died. On the day, the 1-year anniversary, I was in Maui, which now our hearts are with Maui so much these days because of their fire. And that's where I spread his ashes. And immediately after spreading his ashes, I had just a private ceremony, just me. I had some other more public ceremonies and had other people there, but this was just me. And I spread the ashes. And then on my way back to my condo that was in Lahaina, I really feel like I got a message from God or the universe or spirit saying, you need to write a book about how to survive your spouse's suicide. And at the time, I thought that message was the most crazy thing I'd ever heard. There's no way I was going to write a book about suicide loss. A year out, I didn't feel like I could do anything functional. And so 5 years later, I finished the manuscript. It took a lot of fits and starts and getting just the right help through my publisher. Saved by Story is the name of the publishing company. They're wonderful.
And what's the
And
name of your book?
the name of my book is Surviving Spouse or Partner Suicide Loss, a mindful guide for your journey to healing, or journey through grief.
Okay, got it.
And the reason that I named it that, I wanted the word mindful in there because I felt like mindfulness was one of the greatest practices for my recovery, for my healing. So the second book, the day I turned in that manuscript to my publisher, it was so exciting. I was at a writing retreat. I finished it. Here's the manuscript, and I'm acting like I'm handing it to you as if it was ever on paper, which it was not. I clicked send, but I went to bed that night with just this feeling of, I finally did it. I finally answered that call, and now I can rest. And then another call came in that night. I'm not kidding you. The universe, whoever it is that's talking to me from beyond, is telling me, you need to write a companion guide. One night, I couldn't have had one night off. So of course, I got to it right away. I did not hem and haw or take 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, because the 5 years prior to that, producing the Survivor book, I knew better than to not listen to that voice immediately.
Yes.
So it really took me just a week to finish the second manuscript.
Really?
Yeah, because it's so heavily based on the first book. It's really for people who, hopefully the survivor that they're supporting will be reading the first book. And so the two of them can come to a very conscious understanding of what each other needs. And that's why it was so quick to write the second book. Draft, of course, sure. Draft to publication. There's also a lot in between.
Of course there is.
Yeah, but so I did that second book for the same reason I did the first one, not because I wanted to, but because I felt I was called to. Yes. And they just came out in January this year, 2023, and I'm getting a lot of really good feedback. I am helping people, and that my words are helping people, and that was the goal. So.
Yes. And as I said to you before we began our recording this morning, I recommended your books yesterday to a client in my office whose child had died of suicide just this summer. And I feel like your writing is so easy to read, and it allows us to have images, the grief cave you talk about, the flashlight guide, all of those bring to mind something tangible where when we're swimming around in grief, we know we've got a little bit of an anchor. So I really, really am thankful to you for answering the call.
Thank you.
So marvelous. And I'm so thankful you have such a wonderful publisher.
So she's great. I feel like, Georgena, and I'm sure you feel this way too, that if we can do the work, if we can, I moderate grief groups, I volunteer with different organizations. I feel like if we have tools to share around grief and we are able to share them, that we need to.
Yes.
Because there's so much need out there, and so many people aren't able to feel support or support themselves. So
you're absolutely right. And I love this, where we're going next, because having lived through the shock of the death of a beloved by suicide, both of us, we know words matter. So what is your guidance to our listeners, Michelle? What not to say and what to say as the companion to a suicide survivor?
Great question. Thank you. And that is one of the things that I really strive to get out in the world. So thank you for this platform to do it, because what I notice in my grief groups and working with people one-on-one and grief coaching is that a lot of pain comes from the people that we're left with. So we have our grief from our loss, and then the people around us not knowing how to support us. That's why the second book had to come out. So I think one of the most important things we can do as supporters of suicide loss survivors is to witness their grief. Don't try to fix it. When I was in my grief educator course, I learned the term toxic bright-sider.
Oh,
And I thought, how can that be a thing? I mean, bright-siding's not toxic. And then I realized through education that it is, because what you do when you tell someone who is suffering a suicide loss, it'll be okay, especially if you're a young widow, everyone's like, oh, you'll find love again. No, don't belittle what I'm going through right now. It's not time to cheer me up. And that's what supporters think. Cheer up, cheer up. We can end the suffering by pointing to something else. And that's not what the grievers need. They need to be held in their grief. We need to be witnessed and understood as best you can. Of course, you can't fully understand if you haven't gone through it, but to be witnessed. I understand that you are suffering and I am so sorry. No, at least, no, it's okay. None of that. So I think that's the important thing. And there's a lot of pain in witnessing for a suicide loss survivor, and it takes strength.
It does.
So I recommend the supporters to get strength elsewhere and then bring their strongest self to be able to sit in grief with your survivor.
So what would be finding support elsewhere look like for them?
Very similar to what the what the grievers are going through. You know, find people who know not to say at least. Don't say at least you. No. Find people who will witness your struggle as a supporter of suicide loss. And you're probably grieving too. If you're close to the suicide loss survivor, the person who died by suicide is probably a loss for you as well. So you're going to go to grief therapy. You're going to get a grief coach, maybe even go to a group. There are grief groups for people who are not primary mourners, who are friends and family and more distant relatives. They're out there. The support is out there. So make sure that you are getting the support you need so you can be your strongest self to come to your survivor and be there for them.
Yes, and that I'm on the board of Suicide Bereavement Support Northwest here in Portland, and we provide training for groups around all over Oregon, and have groups that are online as well as groups in person. And it is wonderful, and it's very amazing, Michelle, to see who's drawn to the group, because there are friends that are closer in many ways to the person who died by suicide than maybe family. And they're in the group, and it's just wonderful to have them. So I really appreciate you saying that. I really, really do.
Yeah, I mean, the amount that you loved the person is the amount you grieve. It's not a legal relationship or a blood relationship. If you loved a person, then, you know, to a 10, then you're going to grieve to a 10. And it doesn't matter what society thinks of your relationship. So it's important.
And for all of you that are listening right now, I would like you to hear what Michelle wrote in her book. As the companion, you do not have to fix, counsel, or coach. Your role is to witness your survivor's pain, listen to their story, and reassure them that you are there for them and they will get through this in time. And I love your languaging, Michelle, because so many people say, oh, you've got to get over your grief. No, you and I both know it's a journey through. It's an inside journey. And so I so appreciate your languaging. So if you're watching this program and you're someone who's had someone die by suicide, die of suicide, the Purple Book is the one for you, correct?
Yes.
And if you are a companion, a dear friend who probably is also grieving yourself, the White Book is for you. But it's probably the best thing to do is to get both books. and give that one gift to the person who is so bereaved and they're going through all the if onlys.
Mhm.
One of the things I really appreciated, as I said earlier, were the metaphors you used. And I'm very curious about your grief cave. I just really am curious how that came up for you, that image.
Great question. I started writing the book as a hike because hiking is something dear to my heart. And so using that imagery, and then it sort of became more like climbing Grief Mountain.
Yes.
And then I realized, like, where are we starting? Right. And that, the more I learned about grief and also introspected about my own experience, I realized you're not all geared up with your hiking poles and your backpack and your Sherpa and all that. When you start this journey, you are flattened. No one's prepared for suicide loss. It's not something, it's a disaster, like the true definition of disaster. You don't have the sandbags ready to hold back the flood. You have nothing. No preparation when you have, and that's true of a lot of sudden losses,
Yes.
not just suicide loss. But so I tried to picture what that looked like for me. And for me, I was in a dark cave. I felt isolated and alone, and like I had nothing, no tools, no light, not a single thing to help me, even get off the floor of the cave and sit up. So that's where that metaphor came from. And then my publisher actually helped me create sort of the images of, okay, what's in the cave?
Yes.
Finding those tools that we need and getting ready to step out. And that's another thing I think suicide loss survivors need to realize, that you can stay in that cave as long as life allows you to. I mean, some of us have to go back to work, right? So sometimes there aren't choices about particular things you need to do, but you may want to just not engage, not go to parties, not go out to lunch, all the things people want you to do for quite some time. And so my advice in that case is always, no is a complete sentence.
It certainly is. And that's important for many people to hear. And what I was so impressed about was your willingness to ask for help, because that's something that we're reluctant to do in our culture, I have observed. So what prompted you to reach out for help as you did and have written about?
To be honest, Georgena, I was getting very sick. I was not taking care of myself. I was obviously depressed, sad, grieving, and also developed PTSD from the trauma of the time around Glenn's death.
Yes.
And it was the PTSD. I actually had a counselor that I had seen a few times after Glenn died, and mostly I just sat in her office and cried, which was what I needed.
Yes.
But I started having dissociative episodes and flashbacks that were terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And I don't write a lot of detail about this in my books because I wanted the books to be as supportive as possible. Not, how books these days, they want the drama right in the first chapter.
Yes.
They want to see the drama, and I don't want to re-traumatize anyone. So my books are very much like my coaching, like I'm talking to a coaching client. I'm just giving, trying to give as gentle advice. So I didn't talk about that as much in my book, although I did talk about trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started having those dissociative episodes and the flashbacks, I knew I needed help because it was making it so I could not live my life. I had one of them happened while I was driving.
Oh my.
Yeah.
You left your body and here you are behind this powerful car.
Exactly. And it is so terrifying. I can even feel it in my body just talking about it. So yeah. Get grounded. Yeah, good. Yeah, always those deep breaths. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I have a whole, my trauma therapy. So I went to trauma therapy, and my trauma therapist helped me learn those techniques, the somatic techniques of just, right, come back into the body anytime you start.
Yes.
So I can really recognize when something like that's happening and get back fairly efficiently now. It took a lot of practice, but that's really what helped me. And I went through this therapist that I found was through the Returning Veterans Project.
Oh.
Which I had full services because my husband was a military veteran. He was a retired Navy SEAL. So the Returning Veterans Project helped me with everything I needed, cost-free, connected me with a perfect trauma therapist for me.
Good. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to worry about my insurance running out after 30 visits.
Yes.
I could go twice a week. I could go when I needed to go and know that I was cared for.
Mm-hmm. And I'm very curious, because you said that you were not functioning. That was why you absolutely had to reach out for this particular aspect of help. And how long was your grief journey? How long did you stay in therapy, if you feel like you can share that with our audience, Michelle?
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of therapy, and I recommend always having a therapist, because it's really nice to have someone in your corner who is a neutral third party.
Yes.
They don't personally know the person that you're having an issue with. They are just there to listen. Yes. A lot of times friends are going to try to fix things, and your therapist is just there for you.
Yes.
So my therapist retired in March of 2021.
Oh, okay.
And I still see her on occasion, because she still sees a few clients, but is basically retired. And that I have not found a new therapist since, but I'm certainly open to finding one, because I understand the value of it. It's not like, and I talk about this in my book, once you reach the summit,
yes,
Grief Mountain, you're still living your life after suicide loss, and it becomes part of you integrate, but there are still really difficult times. And your difficult times may not even be related to the loss, but having gone through the loss, you might understand how great a need there is to grieve or work through issues that maybe you would have ignored in your earlier life before this new sensitivity. So yeah, I went to her regularly for probably 3 years.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, long answer short.
No, it was the perfect answer, because it's so important for people to realize that this life is difficult. And when we have that third party, we come with our story. So we're here and our story's here. And then we've got that third party witness with their life experience and tools and their training to stay in the moment and not go off on down a rabbit hole or on a tangent. Mm-hmm. Then we can have that support. And it was very interesting to me. I worked with a client recently who had been in grief for 3 years after her husband's death. And her companion recognized that maybe they needed some outside help. And so this person came in, and I'll never forget the session, because we did a Gestalt therapy session with the empty chair. And in 45 minutes, that person shifted, the grief was gone. She realized it was not her fault. She'd done nothing wrong. And she was out the door, truly smiling and bright and free. And so I so appreciate you recognizing and saying, hey, this is something that's important. And I love the deep breath that you just took now.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about how heavy that grief, guilt is in suicide loss. And there's guilt in most grieving, but suicide loss has its like next level guilt. There's always, we coulda, shoulda, woulda ourselves.
Yes. And we can just, go on and on and on.
So the fact that you could help that person lift that heavy weight of guilt, what a gift.
And it was the process. It was so wonderful. It really was. What is one powerful practice you would like to share with our audience today?
Well, I think probably the most, just narrow it down to one. Did you notice how many chapters my book had?
Oh, yes, I did. And I also know how many supplies you had in the book. Yeah. And maybe you want to start there, and then I don't care.
No, it's okay. I
just don't want you to give away everything.
No, my one favorite that I think is really the most important for opening the door to all of the other healing practices, and that is self-compassion. If you can give yourself a break, or teach your clients, if you're in the grief therapy world, teach your clients to just quit shoulding on themselves. Especially with suicide loss, it is the guilt we were just talking about can be debilitating. And you can begin to question everything in your life, every choice that you ever made. If I could let my person die, then, and the thing is, you didn't let your person die. They left for very different reasons than anything you did. And so give yourself a break. That's my biggest thing. You are valuable. You are needed in this world. You are important. You are loved. So self-compassion. Just be kind to yourself. If you need a day in bed to cry and you can take it, take it. Maybe you can only get an hour. Take that. Just let yourself go. Let yourself cry. If you need an extra ice cream, eat the extra ice cream. I mean, don't be hard on yourself. This isn't the time. You can take an extra walk later or something, but this is the time to do anything that you can to nurture yourself and not beat yourself up.
So what I'm hearing for you, that nurturing came with hiking.
Oh, definitely. One of my, being out in nature is so healing for me. I'm actually writing an article right now for a newspaper down in Arizona about suicide loss survival, and I talk about that, being out in nature. And it's very healing. They've actually done medical studies about it, which is, I love that. Being out in nature helps you with, these measurable chemicals in your body, hormones and things. So hiking is incredibly healing for me. And I'm fortunate enough to live in an area with a lot of trees, and I walk my dogs every day. So even though it's not an official hike, I'm still out in nature, and it's really, really healing. It's beautiful.
That's wonderful. Well, I'd like to share, if I may, the titles of a couple of the chapters of your books where you say, she's talking about, you need supplies. Take these supplies with you. And supply number 1 is oxygen, so breathe. Number 2, nutrition, fuel your journey. Number 3, pillow, rest and sleep. And number 4, yoga mat, move to heal. So I just loved that. So often we talk about the tools people need in a toolbox, and I love the word supply. Your languaging is so great. And for those of you watching, I was on a podcast yesterday that will air in September, simply because September is National Suicide Prevention Month. And then there's also World Suicide Prevention Day, September 10th. So we were pre-recording the show, and it was very interesting because we talked about how words matter. over and over again to have the difficult conversation, and how the benefit of going for a walk, there's so many benefits. You don't have to have eye contact. You've got the beautiful trees. You've got other things than yourself to look around. So I just really, you and your yoga mat and your hiking are like a breath of fresh air. They really are.
Well, thank you. Literally, right? If you're out hiking.
Absolutely. Literally.
One would hope. And because I've been doing yoga for decades. I've been teaching yoga for 15 years. I've been a yoga therapist for 10. I didn't want the book to be all about how yoga is so healing and everyone should go do yoga, because of course there's more ways to heal than that.
Yes.
Yoga is great. I cannot say enough about it, but people oftentimes are rejecting yoga for whatever reason. I've heard them all. So I wanted to make sure people were offered a lot more than just get on your mat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Get on your mat.
You heard it first from Michelle. Get on your mat.
Get on your mat.
Absolutely. Well, we've kind of touched on this, because of the trajectory of your grief. And that first year, what I heard was you were non-functional. And then but right away you started therapy. So it was 3 years of really intense work before you were able. But you started writing on the day after that first anniversary.
I did. The day after, exactly. Yeah. And then I met my publisher a year later. She's also a content coach. And so that's what I was using her for at that time, was to help me make my story into something useful for people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so then you added, in many ways, another support in your publisher, as you've referred to her throughout the interview. So that's absolutely wonderful. It really is. One of the things that you said in the book that I really was appreciative of is, just because a loved one died doesn't mean the relationship is over. It's changed forever as we are. Do you want to say anything more about that to our listeners today?
Yes, thank you. I think it's very difficult if you don't believe in, if you don't have a faith or a spiritual practice that allows you to believe life goes on after we leave our bodies. Mm-hmm. But I think even if you don't, what you can do is feel the love. The love is still there. You can think of your loved one. I think about Glenn all the time, and he's so funny, and he was just a hoot and always made me laugh. And different things come up, like, I'll be cooking something in the kitchen and I'll remember something like he would have said, "Oh, gross," about, the mushrooms I'm sauteing or something. We had very, very different eating habits. Like, he thought donuts were, the golden thing to eat, and I thought donuts were the devil. So, see, you're laughing because of him. He's so funny. And so he continues, in my view, to live on in your laughter right now.
Yes. Yes.
And every time I honor his memory by doing anything, helping people with grief, writing these books, writing stories, and I still love him. And so I think that oftentimes suicide loss can be very complicated with love, because a lot of times there is a difficult time ahead of time. We had a very difficult time. We were even separated. We were still married, but we were separated the last 5 weeks of his life, because it was a really difficult time, and I was afraid. But as I go through this healing journey, when I'm bringing forward, I remember the terrible times, and a lot of us suicide loss survivors had terrible times. And one of the feelings we might have is relief, and back to the self-compassion. That's okay.
Yes.
But if there was love, you can bring that part forward. You can keep the love alive by remembering the beauty and the joy that your person brought to the world. That's still here. You can keep that. And if you focus on that more than the trauma, it can grow and the trauma can fade. It takes work.
And that's the new paradigm of grief, Michelle, from Integrated Wellbeing Institute. You're not broken by this loss. You're broken open like a seed to grow in self-awareness and new connections. And you've just spoken that self-compassion is self-awareness. The critical mind goes away. I had the opportunity the other night to be with a group of people I hadn't seen for 3.5 years. And we got to go around the circle and say how COVID had impacted us. And I was able to say, as a result of this time and various things, I no longer live with very much worry, doubt, and fear. And that's self-awareness. And the new connection that you're talking about is that love. It's so wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of love. And we can stomp our feet and say, but I want them here, I want them here. And what we know, the truth is, they're not. And as a result of that, we have to navigate this new way of being, because we can't eradicate what happened. The changes happen. It's all unchangeable. Dr.
Yeah, it's you can't undo it.
No, you can't undo it. Yeah. So I am just curious, is there anything else you would like to share with our audience today? Your thoughts of wisdom.
One little drop of wisdom, other than being kind to yourself, that's really my biggest drop of wisdom. I say it all in my books. So definitely read those, even if your loss wasn't spouse or partner, and just keep going. I think sometimes these practices or tools or supplies that we get only work for a short period of time during our journey, because that's all they were meant to do. You know, it may be that your grief group or your therapist or your friend, whoever's helping you through, you've gotten to the point where you need to move on to the next grief group or therapist or person, because you've grown. You know, it may be that you've done mantra meditation and now you're ready for insight meditation. My personal experience. I go back and forth, but it's, you know, there's always another practice out there. There's always another tool or supply or person out there to help you on the next stage of your journey. So if you feel stuck, just keep working, keep finding another way to grow.
Well, thank you so much, because it's obvious that you have continued this journey. You've grown, and thank you for birthing these twins, these book twins, for all of us out into the world. We cannot thank you enough. And an easy read, maybe not an easy read, a quick read. And
that was my goal.
Make
it very accessible.
That's right. And that's exactly what I experienced as we were doing this together. So thank you so very, very much, Michelle. Is there a website you want our listeners to know about, or what would you like? Anything more?
Thank you. You can find me at inhabitjoy.com. And all my books, I have these 2, and then I have 3 others that I was a contributor to. And all of my podcasts and articles and everything you can find. And you can also get a hold of me. So you can set up a consultation for free, a short conversation. And I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook as well. And I think I was on Twitter, but switched to Thread. I haven't figured all that out yet.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm easy to find. Get in touch with me. Let me help you. If you have any questions, I love to help and support. So
Great. And thank you so much for being you, for taking one step at a time, and you never giving up. And your self-compassion just radiates out to all of us. So this has been a pleasure. It has been a joy. And it's just wonderful to see the transformation in you after that time when we initially met. So take good care. And to all of you, thank you so much for listening today. Thank you so much for joining us on YouTube. The intention is that there will be inspiration, there will be some guidance for you, or you can even copy and paste this link and send it on to somebody that you know who might benefit from it. So until we meet again, thanks to all of you for coming. And once again, thanks so much to you, Michelle and Collins.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Bye-bye.